live from the Canada Light Expo 2024. This is Get a Grip on Lighting. Thank you for tuning in. I'm here with Will Norris with 5x5 Solutions. I was trying to remember the name of his company, and I almost messed it up. And it comes out in Roman numerals. VxV Solutions. Tell us about that company.
Yeah, so we're a lighting controls specific company here in Toronto. We specialize in sort of large scale and small scale lighting projects, but we provide just the controls package and the integrations that go along with them. So operating in a similar fashion to an agency, but slightly more into the integration side. And 5x5 VxV, we go by both names because obviously how it's written is how people tend to perceive it, VxV, but the content of or the idea behind 5x5 is a nerdy reference to old aeronautical engineering, where you had the radio operators speaking to the pilots, and they would say, well, how's the transmission? 5x5 was the sort of clearest transmission, clearest clarity, and signal strength. Yeah.
How's this, 5x5?
Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah.
So we just saw Webster Marsh, one of your colleagues in the lighting controls world.
Sure.
He's also the host of the Lighting Controls podcast. We started Get a Grip on Lighting, and the studio started the Lighting Controls podcast because I hate digital lighting controls.
Okay.
I love analog lighting controls.
Sure.
So I was trained on them. I know how they work. I like to use relays or just even line voltage. Is this and in my career I've seen two previous lighting controls boom bust cycles.
Sure.
The first was the relays and all that sort of stuff came out in the early 2000s, late 90s.
Yep.
Then there was the Cat 5.
So you're thinking of like Redwood.
I'm thinking Incilium.
Okay. Yep.
Right, with the Cat 5 cable.
Sure.
And that was like 2010-ish. Everything was going to be Cat 5. Mm-hmm. And now we're into the Bluetooth era. Is that fair to say?
We're into the wireless mesh era, I would say now.
Wireless mesh era,
yeah.
Okay.
Not all companies use Bluetooth.
Okay, so wireless mesh is accurate.
Wireless mesh is, mostly accurate. Okay. I'll say wireless is becoming the predominant lighting control system for most applications these days. It fits sort of 85-90% of applications, but the difference between sort of hub and spoke wiring topology or wireless topology versus mesh topology, there's plus and minuses to both, and there's just like a technical argument between them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here's my question.
Sure.
Is this the third boom bust cycle, or is this rocket going to take off?
Well, I think it's kind of required to take off.
Why is that?
Well, energy code-wise, we've been pushed down this road that we need to save energy wherever we can. Now, LED technology has obviously brought the loads way down in comparison to fluorescents and HIDs and whatever else. But we're also in this situation where, yes, we use less lighting power generally per luminaire, but we're constantly building more spaces.
Yes.
So we're growing more and more sort of floor space, more and more lights are being installed all the time, more and more power is being drawn on a grid that's pretty antiquated. So we still need to save as much energy as possible to make sure that we're not overloading those grids while the infrastructure slowly catches up. And that's going to take decades. So we're probably going to need lighting controls as well. As of whatever it was, the last study I saw was 2011, lighting accounted for about 17% of end-use electricity in commercial buildings. And 17%'s a large number. It's about the second largest single category of lighting or of power usage.
After what?
General. So general being the sense
Plugs.
Of computers.
Yeah.
Mostly plug-in computers and things like that.
Yeah. Interesting. So, but you can't coerce them in. Because when you coerce them in, so you have like regulations that say if you build a new building or you do a major renovation, right, you have to install this many lighting controls per square foot or one of these metrics, right? But the problem is that most lighting control systems aren't used.
That there is a reluctance to use them in general, yeah. The best lighting control system in the world is the one that no one thinks about.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's like the one in my house. It's all analog.
Sure,
right.
But you're using the most electricity possible there. So, let's think about just things like an example like high-end trim. So, if you turn your light on to 100%, you're at 100% of that load. Perceptually different between 100% and 80%.
Okay.
Minimal?
I don't understand exactly what you're saying.
Okay, so if you look at the sort of perceived lighting of a light fixture, the amount of light that we perceive to see. So we got studio lights blasting in our faces right now.
100 to 80, there's no difference.
Yeah, if I went from this light from 100% down to 80%, perceptually, it's a logarithmic curve, right?
Sure.
So
at some point, you're going to notice what
at
is
some
that
point, but that point isn't 80.
Yeah.
It's not even 70. It's probably towards 60, 65%.
Especially if you dim them slowly.
Well, especially if you don't know they go higher.
Sure.
So if you implement something like high-end trim as a rule and you lock that into the system for day one, then and you're hitting your 25, 30-foot candles that you need for your task lighting, then that's enough. But generally speaking, you got this lamp lumen depreciation value, right?
Yep.
Lamp lumen depreciation is, day one, I get 100% output.
Yep.
We actually design, well, when I used to be a lighting designer, we actually design for a depreciated value because we're expecting that light to be used for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, 10 years. And when we have that depreciation built into our calculations, we're hitting our targets with that depreciation accounted for, which means that we're actually not worried about day one. We're worried about day 5, 10, whatever.
You're worried about days 5,000, 3,000.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So why am I lighting the space to 100% day one when my target levels are based on day 5,000?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's speculation, though, that will happen.
Well, it's measurable data.
Is it?
Yeah. I can take a lumen meter. I can take my design calculations. I can look at what I'm looking at.
No, but in the field, do you have examples of this?
Of course, yeah. You can go to any new office build and put a light meter on the desk and see what the light levels are.
No, what I'm saying is, do you have an example of this high-end trim being done in the field?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we've implemented it all over the place.
Is that right?
Yeah, like we often will have our high scene as 80%. And then if they say, oh, actually high scene's a little low, we'll bump it up. But if they say it's fine, it's acceptable, it meets the measured values, then that's where it stays.
And is your relationship with your clients, is it an ongoing relationship?
It's becoming more and more so that.
I think it has to be.
Yeah. Yeah, we're becoming not just a system provider, we're providing a service as well. And that service is ongoing support because, day one, AV scene is this.
Yes.
Day two, we've moved the TV to the opposite wall of the conference room. We need a new scene.
Yeah.
And so we're usually sort of the last ones into the building, so we have a bit of FaceTime with the client.
Sure.
And then we're also the first point of contact when anything happens to their lights, because we're the ones controlling their lights, even if it's nothing to do with us, even if the light just burns out because the driver failed or something like that.
And are you remoting in to control the lights?
Well, this is where the digitization comes into it.
Sure.
So when we're into these digital networks, we can remote in and we can provide a much quicker turnaround on service calls, and without the sort of having to get boots on the ground, and we can save a bunch of money by not having travel costs and everything in there. And it is a competitive advantage to us that we're not having to go to all these job sites and sort of hemorrhage time on travel. So we can offer better prices.
Can you discover if a specific driver in a specific fixture is out?
Depends on the system.
Okay.
So in your analog world, because like digitization's it's a slippery slope conversation. When we say it's a digital system, what are we talking about? Are we talking about the light? Are we talking about the light controller? Or are we talking about how they work together? Because most of the time, the most common protocol in Canada right now is 0 to 10 volt controls.
Yes.
So 0 to 10 volt controls is an analog protocol.
Sure.
I send a voltage between 0 volt and 10 volt, and it tells the light what to do based on that voltage. Cool. I don't get any feedback.
No.
The light doesn't tell me anything.
It's one way.
Exactly. I have a controller. I know what's going on with that controller. Anything downstream of that, I don't really know.
It's just controlled.
Exactly. It's just it's an output.
It's a dimmer.
Yeah. And so those systems I can't tell. But if I have something like a dolly system where I can actually get bi-directional communication between my controller and my fixture, then I can get a bunch of information. Because dolly spits out a ton of things like, temperature, number of burn hours, etc. Or if it's not there, it reports it to me. My system goes, oh, hey, address whatever is missing. And I can actually do that sort of predictive, not necessarily predictive. You can do predictive on a certain level, but you can do the spot maintenance based on real-time results.
So you can know that fixture F2A needs a new driver.
Exactly. We can see a failure on this system, and if we build a bit of scripting into the system, we can actually make that automated and send an email off to somebody.
198.001.001 is this driver in this fixture.
Yeah, and we can say, hey, this piece of data is missing from our bus. Can somebody check if it's powered off or if it's actually failed?
I don't think you can convince me that there's a major energy efficiency difference between a really solid analog lighting control system that's commissioned properly and a digital one. That's okay. I don't think you can convince me of that, but can you?
Well, okay.
The high-end trim, yeah.
Well, high-end trim can be achieved through analog or digital.
Right.
It's just how you do it.
Yeah. I mean,
because like at the end of the day, like
my point is this though: what's the other argument for lighting controls outside of that, the energy efficiency play?
Well, okay, so there's a few. There's building integration.
Okay.
I can, like, as we go more into sort of, we're seeing a flight to quality right now in office tenants, for example.
Okay.
We're seeing Class B and Class C office space basically stay vacant.
Yes.
We're seeing Class A office space still with robust demand.
Sure.
So what do you get for Class A? You get a better experience.
Sure.
And if that better experience is, I have a building where I have an open office with 200 occupants, but the light happens to be glaring into one person's eye that's above their desk.
Yes.
In an analog system where that's all one giant zone of control,
They take the tubes out of the fixture.
fluorescents are being banned as of 2026.
Yeah, no, but there could be LED tubes. But what you would see in those situations in the past
Exactly.
is you'd see the fluorescent tube sitting on the lens
Exactly.
of the fixture.
Yeah, but now with digital controls, I can poke the system and say, this fixture, don't go above 60%.
I think the only way we're going to achieve that is if we have ongoing control support for these people.
That's a big part of it, yeah. We need to have this as part, well, actually, let me take that a step back.
Sure.
Yes and no.
Okay.
We need that support to exist, but we don't necessarily need it to be people.
Okay. Explain.
Systems need to get better, and systems are getting better, and they need to be more user-friendly, and software actually needs to eat this world.
Okay.
We need to have the real intelligence built into the control systems so it's not confusing, so you don't need people like me.
Yeah.
That's the end goal. I don't want to be on sites doing service calls anymore.
Yeah.
I don't want that to be a thing. I want people to be able to look at their system interface, whatever that is, and be able to understand it. And facilities managers aren't stupid. They know what they're doing. They manage tons of devices within a building.
Sure.
If you make it something that's a streamlined solution, they'll be able to manage it.
First Canadian Place used to be one of my customers before the pandemic.
Sure.
Okay. And I was in the building a lot.
Yep.
And you're from Ontario. You know, that's like a major, I don't know where you're from in Toronto.
Yeah, I live in Toronto.
Yeah, so First Canadian Places, if you're listening to this somewhere else, is a major office tower in Toronto. And those guys, they had guys sitting in front of computers watching their deep lake water cooling system in real time. Because they use that deep lake cooling, you know what I'm talking about? And they were controlling it, they were monitoring it, because the First Canadian Place cools all year round. At least it did back then.
Okay.
It was so full of people, all it would do is cool.
Right.
Even in the middle of winter. Okay?
Yep.
So they're
Makes
cooling
sense.
the building. They had disabled their lighting control system at the time.
Okay.
Or the lighting control system was floor by floor, but it was hit or miss whether they were using it.
Sure.
But they were on that HVAC system.
Yep.
Why do lighting controls people think that we're going to eat the HVAC?
We don't. People who think that are telling you a bad story.
Okay, good. Yeah, because I've heard a lot of people saying that, lighting is all over the building and we should be the hub for all the control of the building.
No.
But you know what? The HVAC guys in these major buildings, they had awesome controls.
Yeah.
And they're operating them.
The most common front end to a building is it's interfaced with the BAS system.
Okay.
And that's a fact. The likes of Honeywell and Johnson Controls, they've made beautiful interfaces that provide real-time management over a lot of different systems within their building. It's our job as lighting controls to make lighting controls as good as possible, and if they have that type of interface in their building, to be able to drill down and tunnel through one system into our system effectively.
Is there an opportunity that for HVAC and lighting controls to merge together?
It's a challenging question. Yes is the answer. It could. There's no technological barrier between the two. It's mostly a path to market and a knowledge gap problem. Because lighting controls operates, or lighting in general operates in a very different manner to how HVAC is sold. And our marketplace is, well, you work in this industry. How chaotic is the lighting industry?
Get a grip on lighting, buddy. It's the name of the show.
Exactly. you need a podcast to explain how complex it is.
It's also like what I always sort of, when I step back and take a look at what happened over the last 10 years, I think that lighting has been more transformed than any other industry, including handheld devices.
That's a bold statement.
I think there's been, I mean, if you had told me in 2014 that I would not need a fluorescent tube anymore, and not only would I not need it, but the LED tube that would replace it would fit in exactly the same fixture, work on the ballast, use 10 watts instead of 32, and you could change the color of the light from 27 to 30 to 35 to 4,000,
Sure.
5,000, 65K. I would have said that's impossible. And that's just a low-end innovation in lighting right now.
Yeah.
You understand what I mean? That's a very low-end innovation, color selectable.
Sure.
When you start putting controls into it, purpose-built fixtures, the changes that have happened in terms of who are the powerful companies in the industry. I mean, what happened in phones? One company went down, Palm Pilot, then Nokia, then BlackBerry. GE, Sylvania, and Philips no longer make lighting.
Yeah.
So my argument is that more changes happen in this industry than any other industry out there. But we haven't seen the lighting controls adoption that we think we should have.
Well, right now, the lighting controls business across North America represents $3 to $5 billion a year.
Mm-hmm.
Canada represents something between, say, $300 and $750 million per year. It's a small business, to say the least, compared to, well, if you look at the total lighting sales is about $3 billion across Canada per year.
Mm-hmm.
Just these are rough numbers, just
Sure.
spitballing type of numbers.
Of
The data is really hard to collect. I've had this problem many times where I've actually searched trying to find this real-time data, and it's a very sort of murky layer because nobody actually reports to a central location on what the market looks like. But there are enough out there to say that these are reasonably accurate rough numbers. Now, lighting controls represents approximately 10% of the lighting business. And that makes sense because we have approximately 10% of the devices across approximately 10%.
But I'll push back at you. I don't
Yep.
think customers are buying lighting controls. I think they're forcing them to buy lighting
Yes,
controls.
100%. Just like they force them to go to energy efficient light sources. Just like they're forcing them to phase out fluorescent tubes and HIDs and metal halides.
Yeah, they just started with the bans in Canada. That just
Yeah.
came out like 6 or 8 months ago, that the government's saying we're sunsetting. First of all, they shouldn't sunset CFLs. Okay, pin-based CFLs. LEDs are not ready to replace those lamps. It's a whole different story. If you've seen LED CFLs starting on fire, because the ballasts are so much different than linear fluorescence, it's
Sure.
a huge problem.
Yeah.
But anyway, don't ban CFLs yet. But they don't listen to me.
No.
But I don't think people were forced to go to LED. I think they were incented.
Mixed bag. It's one of those things that they were incentivized for financing in the early days for sure. And I mean, back in those early like 2010, 2012 era, we were looking at $400, $500 for a 2x4 or a 2x2 troffer in a lot of applications. So like there was a huge hurdle in the LED technology to get over, which was it had to become enough commonplace in order to get the cost down. So the incentivization method works quite well there. The problem is now we're in a fluorescent space where fluorescents are no longer cost competitive to the point where, LEDs are out to lunch in terms of pricing.
The cost of a fluorescent tube is going to go past the cost of an LED tube within the next 2 years.
Exactly. Which is why sunsetting it now can make sense from a government perspective. They always wanted to get rid of this technology. They always wanted to force us forward into the LEDs, but you had to prime the pump in terms of economics to get the prices down low enough on the LEDs to do that.
But there was always an argument without any incentives or coercion. I sell lighting every day.
Yeah.
Every single day,
I know.
I sell people lighting systems. That you could have sold a lot of LEDs without any incentives, and there was a lot of hype.
Yep.
You could have sold. A lot of people would have changed. It wouldn't be nearly what it is.
Sure.
But I don't see that for lighting. I don't think lighting controls can grow without coercion.
Yeah, well, lighting controls definitely needs regulation in order to thrive.
I think it needs standardization, and it needs professional, certified operators that have the same, like some kind of level of education together.
Yeah, I mean, that in an ideal world, sure.
Well, NAILD, the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, is putting on a certification in an advanced in-person lighting control certification in Lightovation in June.
Yep.
We're thinking there's going to be about 150 people there.
Good.
And I think that will be a good help to the industry. I think the lighting controls industry is regional. I think it's compartmentalized. I think it doesn't have, you have a lot of, what do you call it when different manufacturers make their own system?
Almost like an islanding of technology.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that if lighting companies really want to do this, they need to do a single protocol or a single type of software they can all interconnect with, where the components, the materials, the fixtures are all intercompatible with that system.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to say I agree with that. I just know that the practicalities of it are so unbelievably impossible to actually achieve.
At least you're being honest.
Yeah, it's just the practicality of, because like I do this every day. I integrate systems between different manufacturers.
Yeah.
I integrate, Crestron.
So you're like middleware between the two?
Often, yeah. Because even if I'm doing a large scale DMX job where I have a Crestron front end, I'm not using a Crestron device to control my DMX lighting. I'm using a Pharos device to control my DMX lighting, and then I'm writing bits and pieces of software between Crestron and Pharos to make sure they work seamlessly together. And what the platform needs to be, from my perspective, is a mechanism in order to do it. So if we can all speak TCP/IP, we're good. As long as we can all agree on some standards for...
So that's like a software language is what you're saying?
Yeah,
well, the same language?
Internet protocol.
Internet protocol.
Yeah, or UDP, which is a different version of the same kind of concept. But as long as we can all connect into a digital platform where we can set up client-server relationships between different devices, we can make things talk to each other. That's not the problem. Talking to the luminaires... we do need to, in my opinion, move beyond things like 0 to 10 volt, because analog controls not only are challenging from the communication standpoint, but they're also challenging from the aesthetic standpoint. If I have a large open office, I'm going to experience voltage drop across 100 luminaires.
Sure.
And my fixture at the front of the line is going to be brighter than the fixture at the end of the line, just simply because the voltage drop across the cable will say, 0.3, 0.4 volts.
Sure.
I'm going to see a dimming difference. That's fine if it's, uniformly changing. But what ends up happening is we usually mix up normal and emergency lighting.
Okay.
So often you'll end up with the same dim level, but normal lighting will be dimmer than emergency lighting because they will be experiencing separate circuits and separate number of luminaires and separate distances.
Sure.
So all of those analog things start to come into effect. And you start losing that sort of granular control. In terms of digitization, we're all going to be working Crestron, Lutron, Kasambi, we're all going to be fighting over which platform wins. That's going to be a rule no matter what. Just like that's a rule, if we were talking about lighting, constant current drivers versus constant voltage drivers or, whatever. Like there's always going to be different standards that work different for different applications.
Is someone going to win, or is there going to be a different one that wins?
I don't believe there's ever going to be a single winner.
No.
I think there's going to be market dominance from one group that will have a great system, and then technology will age out and some upstart will come up with a new idea and a new mechanism and a cheaper way of doing things or a more advanced way of doing things, and they'll take over for a bit, just like we saw with, as you alluded to earlier, the Nokia phone being taken out by the iPhone.
Yeah.
It's going to happen in lighting
Nokia got
controls.
taken out by BlackBerry.
Sure. Yeah.
Just to be technical.
Yeah,
BlackBerry slayed a lot of dragons, killed a lot of Goliaths before it ran into iPhone.
I actually, when I was a consulting engineer, did a ton of work for Research in Motion.
Is that right?
Yeah, I did. We were like one of their primary consultants in Waterloo. So I worked on something like 30 of their buildings over a period of time, and they ran their prototypes and things were incredible, but for whatever reason, they lost their market share because they fell behind on the technology.
Yeah, I mean, I read the 2 books on BlackBerry a couple years ago. I still have one.
Yeah. And you're probably one of, 5% of the market share?
I would say less.
Yeah, because right now I think Apple reflects something like 52% of phones for teenagers, or up to 29 or something like that.
When they sunsetted the Q10 software, I think it was called Q10 in 2021 or 20, I think there was 250,000 users in Ontario.
Yeah, see,
this is an Android BlackBerry. This is not BlackBerry with its own software.
Right.
That was the real BlackBerry.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? This is
that's
this is an Android phone with a keyboard.
That's where they were most famous, though, for BlackBerry Messenger, right? The most secure, and that was a beautifully crafted, high-security thing that suddenly got wiped out because everybody caught up to that technology.
I think a lot of people have to pay them patent rights a lot.
I'm sure they do.
Came up with a lot of stuff.
I'm sure they do. But that just means you're basically a components manufacturer to another manufacturer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Norris, thank you for being a guest. It's 5x5 Solutions. I want to make sure I got it right.
Yep. VxV Solutions.
VxV Solutions. 5x5, though, is how you pronounce it.
Yep.
Thank you for being a guest here at Canada Light Expo. And you're speaking tomorrow.
I'm speaking actually in like 20 minutes.
He'll be on a panel right here at Canada Light Expo. Get down here and watch him with the other people. They're talking about lighting controls.
All right.
Thank you for listening, guys.
Thank you.